All right, thank you. I'd like to call this meeting of the Assembly Committee on Natural Resources to order. Members, before we begin, a quick reminder to please be sure to mute your microphone when you are not speaking in order to minimize background noise. And with that, Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Anderson?
Here.
Assemblywoman Black? Assemblywoman Brown May?
Here.
Assemblywoman Carlton?
Here.
Assemblywoman Cohen?
Here.
Assemblyman Ellison?
Present.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez?
Here.
Assemblywoman Hanson?
Here.
Assemblywoman Martinez?
Present.
Assemblywoman Titus?
Here.
Assemblyman Wheeler?
Here.
Chair Watts?
Here, we have a quorum. Please mark Assemblywoman Black absent excused. With that, we have two bill hearings on our agenda for today. Before we start, a couple of quick housekeeping announcements for everyone. As a reminder, members of the public can provide testimony in a variety of ways and participate in our meetings. Information on how to do so can be found on every meeting agenda for our committee, as well as on the help page at the Nevada Legislature's website, which can be found in a link in the header at the top of every page. Participants must register in advance and can submit opinion polls or sign up to testify via phone or provide public comment. Written comments can also be emailed to asmnr@asm.state.nv.us before, during, or up to 48 hours after the meeting. Committee exhibits or amendments must be submitted electronically in PDF to our committee manager no later than 4 p.m. on the business day prior to the meeting. Amendments must include the bill number, a statement of intent, and contact information. All exhibits can be found on the Nevada Legislature's website, where you can also sign up for personalized legislative tracking. We ask that public comments be kept to 2 minutes so that all speakers can be accommodated and we can get through the agenda in a timely fashion. Lastly, I'll remind members to please provide your name when making or seconding a motion, which brings us to the next item today. Committee members, as you may recall, throughout session, we were asked to introduce bill draft requests to begin the process, assign a bill number, and get it referred back to our committee. As a reminder, a vote to introduce a BDR is not any indication of support for a bill. It is just to get the bill printed and assigned a number so it can go through committee. Today we have 3 BDRs before the committee for introduction. The first that we have is BDR R467, which urges Congress to designate certain land in Spring Valley as a national heritage area. Do I have a motion to introduce BDR R467?
Chair Tracy Brown May.
Vice Chair, so moved.
All right, it sounds like I have a motion from Assemblywoman Cohen and a second from Assemblywoman Brown May. With that, let's take a roll call vote. Please remember to respond with either yes or no.
Assemblywoman Anderson?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Black? Assemblywoman Brown May?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Carlton?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Cohen?
Yes.
Assemblyman Ellison?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Hanson?
No.
Assemblywoman Martinez?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Titus?
No.
Assemblyman Wheeler?
No.
Chair Watts?
Yes. With that, I believe the motion carries. Next, we have BDR 47-468, which establishes certain protections for certain swamp cedars. Do I have a motion to introduce BDR 47468?
So moved by the Vice Chair.
We have a motion by Vice Chair Cohen. Do we have a second?
Anderson, I'll second.
We have a second by Assemblywoman Anderson. With that, will the secretary please call the roll call vote?
Assemblywoman Anderson,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Black, Assemblywoman Brown May,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Carlton,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Cohen,
Yes.
Assemblyman Ellison, Assemblywoman Gonzalez,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Hanson,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Martinez,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Titus,
Yes.
Assemblyman Wheeler,
Yes.
Chair Watts.
Yes,
I didn't get Ellison.
our motion carries. Thank you. And last, we have BDR R-470, which urges Congress to sell or transfer certain local governmental agencies and nonprofit organizations. Do I have a motion to introduce BDR R-470?
Mr. Chair, this is Tracy Brown. May I like to make that motion?
Got a motion from Assemblywoman Brown May. Do we have a second? I see a second from Assemblyman Wheeler. Thank you, sir.
Discussion before the vote, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Assemblywoman Titus.
Could you read what the bill again, or the BDR again, please? You're falling off
this
on the
is-
last part of it.
So this is BDR R-470, and it urges Congress to sell or transfer certain public lands to local governmental agencies and nonprofit corporations.
Again, you're breaking up for whatever reason. I'm sorry, Chair Watts. It urges Congress to sell to who? And what?
Agencies or nonprofit organizations.
Okay. And we don't have which lands those are before, just for clarification, it's just this top. Could you read on that?
So for clarification, this was brought forth by the Interim Committee on Public Lands. And again, this is just to introduce the bill so that we can get the text out and to the public and any interested parties. So it urges Congress to sell or transfer certain public lands to local governmental agencies and nonprofit organizations.
And when it does go out, the specific lands will be listed in this bill when we get to read it?
Once the bill is introduced during our next floor session, the exact text of it and everything included will be available to every member as well as all members of the public.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right, I believe we had a motion and a second. So with that, will the secretary please call the roll call vote?
Assemblywoman Anderson,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Black, Assemblywoman Brown May,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Carlton,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Cohen,
Yes.
Assemblyman Ellison,
No.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Hanson,
Yes, for introduction.
Assemblywoman Martinez,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Titus,
No?
Assemblyman Wheeler,
Yes.
Chair Watts.
Yes. And I believe that motion carries as well. Thank you all members for that. We can now move on to the rest of our agenda. First up, we have Assembly Bill 34. This bill revises provisions governing the control of pests, noxious weeds, and pesticides. I believe we have somebody from the Department of Agriculture here to present the bill. So with that, whenever you're ready, go ahead and introduce yourself for the record, and you may proceed.
Good afternoon. For the record, Ashley Jepson with the Nevada Department of Agriculture. I'm the Plant Industry Administrator, and I appreciate the opportunity to present this bill.
Sorry, Ms. Jepson, you're coming through a little bit quiet right now. So let's see if we can get that adjusted.
Does that sound better?
Much better.
Okay, I will amplify. I can be a little soft-spoken sometimes. Okay. For the record, Ashley Jepson with the Nevada Department of Agriculture. I am the Plant Industry Administrator, and I appreciate the opportunity to present this bill. This bill really, sorry, Chairman Watts, would you prefer me primarily answer questions, or are you okay if I give a brief overview?
Please go ahead and give a brief overview, and then we'll answer any questions that members may have.
Great, thank you. For the record, Ashley Jepson. So this bill really prioritizes in 3 different areas. NRS 555 governs our Noxious Weeds program, our Nursery registration program, and also our pesticide compliance and enforcement program. And each of those have some changes predominantly pertaining to our pesticide compliance program. The first being section 1 through 4 involves some definition changes to our Noxious Weeds program, and that really is specific to including the term propagated materials. Section 5 pertains just adding some minor language to our nursery program so that there's an exemption for those not just selling through catalog, but also through online sales. So some clarification with modern times on that. And then sections 6 through 26 pertain to updating our pesticide control compliance program to reflect federal regulation changes. And also we're trying to clean up that language so it's easier to understand and navigate. There's a lot of moving pieces to our pesticide compliance program. So with that, I'll jump into number 1. So sections 1 through 4, it provides some clarification in terms of propagative materials. So we're trying to, so in under section 1, control, meaning to cut, destroy, or eradicate noxious weed populations, we felt the need to make sure that that was clear as to the expectations of controlling noxious weeds, which are obviously problematic to our public lands. So a very important aspect here is that the type of control is reflective of the species and how it tends to reproduce. So this here is allowing the department to clarify that language and also make it clear that the intent of these noxious weeds populations is to work towards eradication. I want to stress that, really we're continuing to work with folks that are diligent about their control, and it's a significant issue, but this allows us to lay out the expectations specific to the species that's of concern. Also here, as mentioned, we define propagated materials, so meaning any seed or cutting that has potential for reproducing. The other piece within our Noxious Weeds program that we're refining is we're including guidelines established by the North American Invasive Species and Management Association. And that is specific to our weed-free certification program. It's a voluntary program. This organization sets the standards, and we work under a memorandum of understanding to provide this great service for minimizing noxious weed populations. So we just wanted to clarify that that's the guidelines that we operate under, which is the addition there as well. Moving on to section 5, where we have one revision to our nursery program. And again, that pertains to there are exemptions for folks that are selling or distributing nursery products through catalog. If it's solely through catalog sales, they're exempt. But as we know today, most of that occurs online. So we're adding that provision that if it's done through an online source, that they would comply with that as well. Moving on to the bulk of our changes here for sections 6 through 26 pertaining to our pesticide compliance program. So I want to just give a little bit of context here. The intent of this program is to provide to first of all, test our pest control operators and companies in general to make sure that they have knowledge of the competency standards that are expected by federal law, and that ultimately they're applying pesticides in a way that's safe to themselves, the public, and of course to the environment. So this really governs that piece and how they're certified, how they're licensed, and to make sure that they're meeting those expectations. We work under a cooperative agreement with EPA, so a lot of these changes pertain to things that have changed on the federal level to reflect that. So with that context in mind, we've referenced CFR in here in terms of the competency standards that are expected to be met. And again, those are really specific to when they're applying it, environmental conditions, safety standards, those areas. But we're also trying to clean up the language, streamline processes a little bit, and that's through 3 forms of criteria, being our private applicators, non-private, and commercial. In the past, it's been a little bit of confusing to navigate, and that's how we felt it would be best structured to make it a little bit clearer. For clarification, our non-private applicator would be a government employee. So for those of you that may have been involved in 2017 legislation, AB 32 was to govern government applicators, and that is not going away. We've had some concern on that. It's actually being folded under non-private applicator. So anybody that's doing restricted use pesticides or general use pesticides are governed in some capacity, and this is clarifying that. So here we have it clarified that a commercial applicator is someone that, of course, is doing it for hire, for profit, versus a private applicator who might be somebody that has that's the landowner or is employing somebody on their land for ag purposes to do pest control. There's provisions for them, and then also, of course, folks that are doing it as part of their government employment. So that's how we've tried to separate it, and then we've also tried to fold in those new CFRs that we have to demonstrate compliance to as part of our cooperative agreement. Sure, I covered the high notes. I think that kind of gives an overview, and I'll end my presentation there.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Jepson, for the presentation. Sorry for the delay there. We do have some questions from members. I'll start with Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you, and thank you for the quick presentation. I greatly, it was nice just to get straight to the point, so I really appreciated that. My question actually does not have to do with the application or even the division between the providers. It has more to do with the change in Section 3 that is adding in the electronic mail, which I greatly appreciate that because it's time for us to start moving into some more electronic things. But with that electronic mail, how do we verify that somebody has in fact received that information? And then also, who makes the decision as to whether or not it is done with the certified mail or the electronic mail as it is currently defined in this language? It's on Section 3, subsection 2B, or I'm sorry, 3B.
Mr. Chair, is it okay if I respond directly?
Yes, please go directly to the member. Thank you.
For the record, Ashley Jepson. I appreciate the question. So we tend to try to communicate as many ways as possible. In our industry, there's varying levels of needs. So oftentimes we will send out certified mail on top of electronic, but we wanted to minimally have the ability that if the email they're providing on file is part of their licensure, the expectation is that they're providing accurate, easy means of communication. So our program managers work directly with our DAG when certain issues are being issued, if there's a compliance issue, and they're typically sent out in multiple manners to make sure that that's communicated. Licensing, we tend to issue initially through through email. And if we're continuing to have issues, we'll try some of those other means of communication through other information that's listed through their licensure. Does that answer your question?
Mr. Chair? Okay. Follow up?
Yep, go ahead, follow up.
Thank you, and thank you. And I realize that this is all brand new to me, so it's important you know that too. But I really appreciate the fact that there's multiple items. I just was a little bit concerned about the idea of it being able to uphold in law. And so finding out that there is a multiple communication definitely answered my question. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have a question from Assemblywoman Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for your presentation. On section, I have a question specific to the bill. On section 11, or I'm sorry, in section 12, that lists the purpose that what the NRS says, and it's in quotes, restricted use pesticide. What that means. So when there's a restricted use pesticide, can private citizens apply a restricted use if they apply for if they have the right credentials federally? Are we expanding what somebody has to do now? They have to get a certification from the state? Is that, I see an expansion here of requirements and applications that now the private person, a rancher who's using this on their farm, somehow they can apparently get this restricted pesticide. So could you clarify that for me, please?
For the record, Ashley Jepson, I appreciate the question. So we operate, so there's the federal standard, and we're there to help enforce it and streamline the process on a state level. So in the past, if they've ever been applying our restricted use pesticides, they've had to be, this term, certified. And that is still persisting just underneath that, what we're calling a private applicator. So a private citizen, if they're the landowner, or even if it's, say it's an ag producer and their neighbor, if they're working together, as long as it's not for commercial use, they can apply for that private applicator, and it allows them to use those restricted use pesticides, which are a bigger concern. But they would apply just through us. They wouldn't have to go through multiple levels.
So the private rancher citizen can't use the restricted pesticides that you're referring to now?
Now, for the record, Ashley Jepson, they cannot without this certification.
So currently they can't get a federal certification and then use them. So this would broaden who can have access to these restricted pesticides. Is that what I'm hearing?
For the record, Ashley Jepson, I apologize. They had to be certified with us before. This is just a language clarification. They've always had to be certified in order to do that.
They currently have application right now.
Yes.
So a private citizen can get certified, take a test, or whatever the certification process is, and the safety of these things. They have access to this. And then this bill is, I'm not really clear then what the additional benefit of this bill is. If they can already do it through certification process of you, will you be charging an additional fee? So I just need apparently some more clarification. If they're already able to do it with this certification, where's the benefit? It sounds like just another fee that they have to get. So I'm just curious here.
Sure. Yeah. For the record, Ashley Jepson. So it's updating. You'll see listed in here in every, whether they're private, non-private, or commercially certified, they have to abide by these new updated Code of Federal Regulations. So what's happening here is it's the competency, the written exam, and the competency standards that they comply with. That's the purpose of this bill, is to update that CFR. But as we're submitting that, we're also trying to clean up the language so it's easier for people to find out where they fall. In the past, it was, the way it was defined wasn't really clear for, anybody to just look at and figure out, okay, I would actually fall under a private. It's my land. Or I'm next to my neighbor. We're trying to clean up that piece while also adding that as you are tested and you comply and you register, you have to meet this code of federal regulations from that exam. So it's updating that piece, but then trying to clean up the language so they know where they fall in terms of the licensure category.
And is there a different fee structure in the license category?
If it's okay, I have my subject matter expert, Brett Allen here, and I'm gonna kick that to him.
Because if it saves ranchers money, I mean, I'm for it. If it's a less fee now, I'm just need some clarification on the fee structures. And so if they need to know where they fall, is there some advantage to being a private landowner doing this certification since they already do the certification? I just need some clarity. Thank you.
And there's no fee change here, but Brett, are you comfortable answering that?
Correct. For the record, Brett Allen, Department of Agriculture. Correct. The fee is going to be the exact same, where it's not a different fee. It's not one in addition to. It was just, we are just making this adjustment to meet EPA standard, their new competency standard. That's it. There's not an additional test or an additional fee. It's just to meet the new EPA standard, which is, it's taken a long time, but it's finally updated, and now we have to meet that standard. That's all. Nothing. It's going to be the same fee.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the questions.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Titus. With that, we'll go on to Vice Chair Cohen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation, Ms. Jepson. I have a question about something throughout the bill, and I just want some general information. I can give you the specific sections if you need me to, but there's a lot of reference to powers that the director has. Whether a person has demonstrated something to the director's satisfaction, the director having the ability to deny or suspend different inquiries, things like that. Can you just give us a general idea about what's appealable and where does someone go if they don't like a decision that the director made? Do they appeal to the district court? What happens after that? And again, I can give you the specific sections if you do want to do that.
For the record, Ashley Jepson, no, that's a great question. And I'll preface this too with we really try to work off of the federal and just meet what the minimum requirements are, unless obviously we would see something that's an immediate concern. The process would be if we did find that there's a violation to statute or to code, we would notify them of the specific violation, and they would be notified with an opportunity for what's called a notice of hearing. So if they wanted to contest it, and that's their opportunity to present why they don't feel like they're in violation or why they do feel they're meeting requirements, and that they're meeting those expectations, it goes before a hearing officer, and they're able to demonstrate their case, and then the conclusion is made based on that process. So they certainly do have an opportunity to state their case and then to even appeal it after that phase as well.
Okay, thank you for that. And then, but if they're not satisfied, then when you say they have a right to appeal, then can they go to district court, or do they never have that option?
For the record, Ashley Jepson, you're exactly right. So if they weren't in favor of the hearing officer's conclusion, yes, they can appeal that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Chair Cohen. We have a question from Assemblyman Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Justin, when you were talking about fees with Dr. Titus, I'm not sure exactly what that meant, that the fees won't be changed, because I look at section 2, subsection 2, or subparagraph 2, and it says a director may establish and collect reasonable fees for such a program, which to me means that those reasonable fees are not included now because we're putting them in this law. So what's going to change, and what is the limit on the fees a director may put in? Because I don't see anything here. And what, You need to clarify this for me because it looks to me like you could just raise the fees anytime now. Say, well, we didn't really mean to during the hearing, but this came up, that came up. So there's no limit. Can you just explain that to me, please?
For the record, Ashley Jepson, and I appreciate you bringing that up. And I apologize, I meant to touch on this during my presentation. So in reference to section 2, there is an addition here that says the director may establish and collect reasonable fees for such a program. That is pertaining, first of all, this is actually pertaining to our weed-free certification program. And I want to mention that this is actually, we have the authority currently to charge a fee under NRS 587. However, we were trying to fold it under here because this is where we regulate that weed-free noxious weeds program as it stands. So it's just cleaner again for the viewer to see everything in one spot rather than playing the guessing game of where it might be in statute or code. So it was a cleanup attempt, but it's not a new fee. It's in current regulation, but 587, or excuse me, 587. And here we're just trying to consolidate it and put it where everything else is with our weed-free noxious weeds program. So again, I apologize for not being clearer on that.
Okay, thank you, but there's no cap to it. It's just whatever the director decides is reasonable, right?
It has to, excuse me, for the record, Ashley Jepson, it has to be established in regulation. So we, it would be adopted in our code, and that's how we would be able to charge. It would have to go through the public process in that aspect.
Okay, big no for me.
All right. Are there any other questions from the committee for Ms. Jepson? All right, hearing none, thank you so much for the presentation. We'll now move on to testimony on Assembly Bill 34. We'll start off with testimony in support. As a reminder, to provide testimony, you must register online at the legislative website where you will receive the information to call in to join the meeting. With that, please remember to clearly state and spell your name and limit your testimony to 2 minutes. We'll begin support testimony. So Broadcast Production Services, can you please open up the queue and add the first caller in support?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in support of AB 34, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, it seems that we have no callers in support at this time.
Thank you. Let's move on to testimony in opposition to Assembly Bill 34.
To testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 34, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, it seems that there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. And with that, we'll move on to testimony in the neutral position on Assembly Bill 34.
To testify in the neutral position on Assembly Bill 34, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 010. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Thank you. Make sure you can hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Please proceed.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. This is Jake Tibbetts, spelled Jakebibbitts, and I'm the Natural Resources Manager for Eureka County. I did sign up today to provide neutral testimony because we were intending to listen to try to get a better understanding of the intent of the bill and help inform our opinion on it moving forward. So I did listen to the presentation and some of the justification for it. And again, signing up neutral. What I want to express are just some concerns moving forward. We understand the intent of aligning with the CFRs and some of the things trying to do, but just wanted to bring a few things to the committee's attention and the Department of Ag's attention. Because I heard in the presentation very little described about some of the changes to the government applicators, now lumping them into what's called non-private applicators. I'd point out to the committee that if you look at the very end of the bill, there's a list of repealed sections, the lead lines of repealed sections, and nearly all of those have to do with government applicators. In the 2017 session, just 2 regular sessions ago, these changes related to government applicators were put into the statute. I was part of that process, as many others were, also representing the Eureka Conservation District as the county appointed supervisor. And there were a lot of pre-bill discussions before that language ever went to the 2017 session, and we just hadn't seen that with this current effort. We run a very organized and active weed control effort here. We have one of the few organized weed districts in the state of Nevada in this area that I also manage. And we think there's some potential implications on those government applicators. One of the things that's a bit concerning is it talks about in Section 15 the licenses that would be required now that would seem to lump in the government entities. And while it says there's 2 different licenses that would be required, but one of them is actually a business license. And while it does say for hire or for profit, without a definition of for hire, I don't know if that's been defined legally somewhere else. But just a quick search of even a legal dictionary online will show that for hire is letting out of goods or services for a money consideration. And a lot of counties, weed districts, conservation districts receive grant funding to do weed control. And sometimes it even covers some of the overhead for staff to do that. And I think it could be lumped in here that is for hire, even though it's more of a reimbursement. But would it require a business license? And I can read this, that since it is the letting out of services for a money consideration, it could be lopped into make counties and weed districts and conservation districts apply for these business licenses. But anyways, with that, yes, I'm wrapping up. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Sorry. So yeah, we're welcome to work on these issues and hope to get to some way that's a little more clear for the government applicators. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Tibbetts, for your testimony. We'll move on to the next caller in neutral on Assembly Bill 34.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 109. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Justin Harrison, Justin Harrison, representing Clark County. Really just want to first thank Ms. Jepson for her presentation and for her willingness to meet with the county on some of the initial concerns we had upon first review. Upon that meeting and discussion with members of the department and Ms. Jepson, we were able to clear up those concerns. The county does have a large vector control division that is housed within our public works department that works to control that weed population, particularly in our right-of-ways here in urban Clark County, and more so in the land in the rural areas of the county. So would just like to again thank Ms. Jepson and the department for clarifying those questions we had, and here to answer any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison, for your testimony. With that, we'll move on to the next caller in neutral on Assembly Bill 34.
Chair, the public line is open and working, but there are no more callers in neutral at this time.
All right, thank you. With that, we'll end testimony. Ms. Jepson, we do have a couple. I missed a question and then a couple more popped up, so we're going to do a couple more, and then I'll give you a chance to make any closing remarks. So we did have a question from Assemblywoman Carlton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So if I heard the explanation correctly, the language that's being referred to as the reasonable fee language on page 4, line 11, that language already exists in another area. You're just trying to clean it up. So this really isn't a new fee. It's just going to have a different place to live. So even if this was amended out of this bill, this fee would still exist, correct?
Ashley Jepson, yes, that is.
I'm sorry, we couldn't hear you.
How about, am I coming in?
There you go.
For the record, Ashley Jepson, yes, you are correct. We currently have the authority to charge the fee, and we do have the fee in NAC.
So I just wanted to make that perfectly clear, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Carlton. We had a question, I believe, for legal from Assemblywoman Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for this opportunity. And I think I need some clarification, I think, and maybe legal can answer and maybe the department itself can, but along a line of questioning that Assembly Hansen, I think, is also going to go. I was concerned about, and I need clarification if this power already exists, that folks have to get a business license, not only just from, I assume that in the state, we need to get a business license for any businesses, but does this now require an additional business license that they didn't require before, issued by the director? And this is section 15, number 2, and maybe we could get clarification. Does the director already have and require and have the authority to issue a business license under this section? Or is this a new ability of the director? And I don't know who can answer that.
For the record, Ashley Jepson, yes, currently we do have the authority to require the for-profit to have a business license, and it is in our existing for-profit or for hire is defined in our current statute. So it's just reorganizing. And Brett, or Mr. Allen, if you want to expand on that, that's fine too.
For the record, Brett Allen, Department of Agriculture, correct. It's not an additional business license. We do currently have a business license defined in our NRS, and that's the only business license for commercial pest control industry for what we would be calling the commercial applicators, the licensees, the license operators. Just correct. We do currently have the authority for that business license. It's defined currently, and that there's no additional one, just a same business license.
And we're not requiring the private person that gets certified to now have a business license to do this?
Brett Allen, no, it's just not for the private. It's just a competency exam, meeting those federal requirements, showing that they're knowledgeable in the standards, and then to get that RUP certificate. But they're not going out and doing it for hire. They're doing it on their own property, applying those restricted use chemicals. The difference is going out and doing contracted work.
I think I hate to belabor this, but you use the term certificate, and then they take a test and they're certified, but then you're using the term they issue a business license. So those are two separate things, are they not? So they're already required to get this business license, and in order to get the business license, they have to be certified?
For the record, Ashley Jepson, so the folks that are doing this, am I coming through okay?
Yeah.
The folks that are doing this for commercial hire, for profit, they're the ones that need, as part of their credentialing, they need the business license. Not a private applicator, which is somebody that owns the property or has their own staff for that property. They do not need it, nor would a government or the non-private government folks, just somebody that's advertising, going out and doing pest control services.
They already need that business license. Okay, thank you for the clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your patience.
Thank you. Mr. Amburn, do you have anything to add on this?
Thank you, Chair Watts. Alan Amburn for the record. I did just want to throw in a couple of things just to hopefully provide additional clarification. The first dealing with section 15. So if I do want to point out that we actually are going to be limiting who has to get a license under subsection 1 by specifying that the natural person has to be doing these activities for hire or for profit. Currently, that language is not in statute. So the way I read existing statute is that any natural person who wants to engage in any of those activities in pest control or service in any of those activities for pest control have to be licensed. So you can make an argument that a private applicator currently would fall under that. By adding that for hire for profit, we are limiting who now has to get a license to these commercial applicators, these business entities. And then in subsection 2, we are explicitly talking about, okay, so who should go get a business license? We're talking about a natural person or business entity who seeks to operate, again, for hire or for profit, a pest control business. Now, this is talking about the licensure for pest control. And then there is the separate issue, which is dealing with the certification for the restricted use pesticides. And so that certification for restricted use pesticides is where we're talking about these private applicators, non-private applicators, and commercial applicators. And so that's where they have to, and the adjustments being made in this bill now requires them to comply with those federal regulations. So that's the main change that's happening to a private applicator or a non-private applicator, is that they have to comply with those federal standards. I believe that's section 21 or 20 of this bill. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Amber. I appreciate the clarification. Assemblyman Wheeler, did you have an additional clarifying question for Mr. Amber before we wrap this up?
I did. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for indulging me. But when Ms. Jepson spoke a few minutes ago about section 2, subsection 2, that really confused me, because if we're already charging this, then there's no revenue enhancement. So I'm wondering from legal, why is this a 2/3 bill if there's no revenue enhancement? Because that's the only thing that clicks off a 2/3 bill. Or is this a new fee? Thank you.
Alan Amber for the record. And so in regards to that, I can look up and find after this meeting, Assemblyman Wheeler, the specific regulations and statutes dealing with the specific fee. I don't know that off the top of my head. In regards to 2/3, generally when we are drafting bills and we give an agency or an officer the authority to establish and collect fees, regardless if that's happening or not, it's just like we're now placing this in statute. That's typically why we add it in there, that we bring it to the awareness of the body. That way, you know, if it is a situation where new fees are being collected in the body as a whole, the legislature as a whole then has to pass it by 2/3 majority. In regards to whether or not this is a specific fee that's currently existing, I will defer to Ms. Jepson on that, but I can also look up after this meeting and confirm that for you, sir.
I'm going to quickly follow up, with Mr. Amber. So if in consultation with the agency, it's determined, as has been indicated, that it is revenue neutral because the fee is already authorized within NAC or another portion of statute, then the 2/3 requirement could be removed. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Alan Amber for the record. I'm not too sure about that one. That would be a decision by Legislative Council in consultation with leadership.
Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Amber. All right. I think that's all the questions that we have on this bill. So with that, thank you, Ms. Jepson. Is there any closing remarks that you'd like to make?
For the record, Ashley Jepson, no, just I appreciate your questions, and I'll make sure that I get over where we currently have the fee authority for our weekly Noxious Weeds program for participation. Thank you.
That came in a little bit faint at the end, but no, it's no problem. Please follow up with staff to provide some of the information on the current fee structure that exists. We'll make sure that gets distributed to the members of the committee for their information. And again, appreciate you presenting this bill. Thank you, Ms. Jepson. With that, we will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 34 and open the hearing on Assembly Bill 74. This bill revises provisions relating to pesticides. And with that, I'll turn it back over to the department. You may proceed whenever you're ready.
For the record, Ashley Jepson. This one is much smaller, thankfully. So this, just a little background as to this program. It involves the registration and distribution of pesticides. So with an emphasis on restricted use pesticides, as we mentioned before, those are, a bigger concern to public and environment. The only change here is same thing. It's updating our statute to reflect changes in federal requirements, and that pertains to record keeping for those that are selling restricted use pesticides. So here it specifies that each sale and distribution of those pesticide or restricted use pesticides need to be recorded. One thing I just want to provide for clarification in that 40 CFR, the requirements there, the intent is just to the user. So selling to a wholesaler or whatever that may be, or to a retailer, they're not having to track it. Once it's being sold to a potential end user is where those changes are, if you haven't had a chance to look at that CFR. And I'll also just mention the areas that have been stricken in red. The reason being is all of those are referenced in that CFR, the requirements for what that record must entail, which is why we're referencing CFR in case they add anything additional that then we're up to par with that Code of Federal Regulations. So that's all I have for that, and I'll conclude.
Thank you, Ms. Jepson, for the presentation. Members, are there any questions for Ms. Jepson regarding Assembly Bill 74? All right, hearing none, I'll ask one very quick clarifying question, which you touched on at the end of your presentation. Just to be clear, the requirements that are being stricken from statute are incorporated within 40 CFR, which is referenced in the new language. And do you know, are there any additional requirements within the CFR currently that would be added by adoption of this language?
For the record, Ashley Jepson, in looking at it fairly quickly, it's all very similar. It's place of business, what the restricted use pesticide is, the person, the applicator. I'm not seeing firsthand anything that really stands out. The only thing I'll note is it does require that the product name and the EPA registration number be included. But that's the only thing I'm seeing that really sticks out. And I'm happy to provide, I can provide some more bullets that might emphasize change, but I'm not seeing anything substantial here.
Thank you, Ms. Jepson. I appreciate your quick review of this and just wanted to make sure that we got on the record. There are no, I guess, major changes. Mr. Amburn, is there anything you wanted to add on this?
Thank you, Chair Watts. Alan Amburn for the record. I do just want to point out, so currently it is paragraph B of subsection 5 that is being deleted, where we're asking for the name and address of the person to whom sold or delivered. Federal regulations provide that it's the name and address of the residents of each certified applicator to whom the restricted use pesticide was distributed or sold, or if applicable, the name and address of the residents or principal place of business of each non-certified person to whom the restricted use pesticide was distributed or sold. So an argument could be made that existing statute, it's essentially that you have to provide the name and address of any person, and then federal regulation is the name and address of a certified applicator, and then of any other non-certified person if that information is provided. But again, this is just deferring to federal regulations.
Thank you very much for that clarification, Mr. Amburn. All right, we do have a question from Assemblywoman Hanson.
Hi, thank you, Chair. It actually is a comment, and sorry I had so much going on, I couldn't type my question fast enough. Actually, as my former life, I was an editor, so when I see 8 or 9 lines of text being eliminated for 2 lines, and it accomplishes the same purpose and aligns with the feds, this is a win, right? Did I read it right?
For the record, Ashley Jepson, that's ultimately our goal, and just to keep things updated, since we're trying to work in cooperation with EPA, that we're just able to update those standards as these new things come in mind. So, yes.
Great. I just wanted to give you a shout out. We were a little hard on you on the other bill, but this one's looking great. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Hanson. And yes, a recurring theme is making sure that our statutes can adjust as other elements that they are tied to grow and are modified. So I think there's generally in the committee and seeing modifications that allow for that. I believe Assemblywoman Vice Chair Cohen had a quick question.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Again, not language that's being changed, but in section 1, when reference is made to the person, for instance, the person registering, section 1, sub 2A, is this one of those situations that we're using person and we're including corporations and calling them person as well? And I can ask that to legal if you'd prefer.
Yes. Mr. Amburn, would you like to step in on this?
Thank you, Chair Watts. I would. Alan Amburn for the record. Yes, Assemblywoman. So we would defer in this situation as NRS 0.039. That's the preliminary chapter. And there we provide that person means any natural person, any form of business or social organization, and any other non-governmental legal entity. And that includes like corporations, partnerships, associations, and other entities. We do specify that that term does not include a government, governmental agency, or local subdivision of a government.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I think I have to look at that statute at the beginning of every session. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair, for bringing NRS Chapter 0 to the Natural Resources Committee. Are there any other questions for Ms. Jepson on Assembly Bill 74? Hearing none, we will now open up testimony on Assembly Bill 74. We'll start with testimony in support. And with that, I'll ask Broadcast and Production Services to open up the public comment queue and identify any testify in support of Assembly Bill 74.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in support of Assembly Bill 74, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in support at this time.
Thank you. We'll now move on to testimony in opposition of Assembly Bill 74. Broadcast, can you see if anyone wishes to testify in opposition to this bill?
To testify in opposition on Assembly Bill 74, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. And with that, we'll move on to testimony in neutral on Assembly Bill 74. Broadcast, can you see if anyone wishes to testify in neutral position?
To testify in neutral on Assembly Bill 74, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in the neutral position at this time.
All right. Thank you very much. I'll close testimony on this bill. And Ms. Jepson, are there any closing remarks that you wish to make on this bill?
For the record, Ashley Jepson, no, I just appreciate your time and attention. It helps us identify whether we're making this process simpler, which is ultimately our goal for industry. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for that statement and for your presentation of both of the bills today. I will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 74, and that moves us to the last item on our agenda, which is public comment. Once again, a reminder that in order to provide public comment, you must register online in order to get the call-in information. We ask that anybody wishing to provide public comment limit their comments to 2 minutes. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Broadcast and Production Services to see if we have anyone wishing to provide public comment for us today.
Thank you, Chair. The public line is open and working, but at this time there are no callers.
All right. Thank you again to Broadcast Production Services for helping us ensure that the public can participate in our meetings. The next meeting of our committee will be on Wednesday, February 24th at 4 p.m. And with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.